I am absolutely delighted to welcome to our first ever episode of We Are Labour, the MP, Alistair Strathern, who I did actually meet in person a couple of times in Mid Bedfordshire when he ran his inspirational and actually very long by-election campaign. Welcome to the show, Ali. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me along, Dan, and thanks again for your heroic efforts in Mid-Beds. You were a constant source of energy and enthusiasm through a slightly longer by-election campaign than I think any of us were expecting at the time.
Yeah, right. So was it called, it was in October, I think, your election, wasn't it? And yet you started in June, is that right?
Yes. So Nadine resigned for the first time on Twitter in June. We obviously selected very quickly to get everything in place. She then had slightly different ideas about the pace she wanted things to go at. So yes, it wasn't till October we finally got a chance to go to the polls.
I love that. So you're actually from the area, right? And I was just going to ask, as somebody who is a local to Mid Bedfordshire, that must be quite an interesting experience standing to be the MP for the actual places where you grew up.
Oh, definitely. I think one of the most joyous parts of the by-election campaign was the surprise on both faces when I knocked on a door and a former teacher or classmate or friend that I hadn't seen for a very long time opened it on the other side. And while there is nothing like campaigning as part of an exciting by-election campaign, there really is nothing like campaigning somewhere where you've got those connections and where each week, each month, you are reconnected with people you haven't seen for quite some time.
Yeah, it's that awkward thing, isn't it, where someone's giving you detention a few years ago and here you are on their doorstep saying, can you vote for me? I promise I've reformed myself.
Well, it sounds like you've got a strange insight to what I might have been like as a student there, Dan, that I won't dwell on, but it was really good fun, actually, bumping into former teachers.
So what was it then that made you want to stand in the first place? And of course, I know a by-election's a little bit different because it comes up, it could be any seat in the country, of course, the general election, but this was quite special because it's your place where you grew up. So what has it made you want to stand in the first place?
That's a really good question. So I'll be completely honest, I hadn't necessarily been planning on standing in the election this time round. I think I'd reached a point where both my jobs, both working climate change at the Bank of England and kind of leading on children's services in Waltham Forest, where I was a councillor at the time of the selection, I was enjoying the impact I was having, but I was increasingly finding frustrating the limits on what I could do, given the complete failure of the Conservative government to deliver on both of those agendas, both on the environment and when it came to young people, and particularly young people in care and local authority work. We were running against a government that just seemed to want to run those causes into the ground. And it was true from speaking to a social worker to leading insurance executive. There was a universal agreement that we needed change. And so I probably got to the point where, having not expected to stand at all, I'd kind of reached a point where I was beginning to think maybe I should be putting my head above the parapet to try and make a difference this time round. And then, what better trigger to doing that than an out of the blue resignation back in Bedfordshire when I grew up? And, it all happened very quickly from there, really. Within the next couple of days, I was getting texts from friends and family back home asking me if I was going to go for it. I had about 48 hours, I think, between Nadine tweeting she was standing down and the party kind of opening applications to make up my mind, basically, on whether it was something I was going to do. And after speaking to friends, after speaking to my partner, Megan, we decided, it's not often you get a chance to make history where you grew up and really stand up for causes you believe in. And it was just such an amazing opportunity at an amazing time to get stuck in.
But there must have been some sort of apprehension at first because this is a very Tory area, right? I mean, has Labour ever won? I know the seats probably changed over many, many kind of decades, but has Labour ever won any part of that constituency before?
Not any meaningful part, no. There'll be little parts around the fringes that might have been in Luton or Bedford town previously as constituencies. But in terms of the core part of Mid Bedfordshire, no, that had never been Labour at any point in its existence. And indeed, there are no Labour councillors elected at any level across the area I currently represent. So it really was completely uncharted territories for the Labour Party, which was daunting, but also quite exciting, right? It was a chance to build up that relationship with people for the very first time. And actually, if we were able to get a hearing, if we could campaign in a way that got people's attention, it would be a great chance for us to set a brilliant first impression of Labour and what might be available to them come the general election.
Well, this is exciting to me because I think being a nearby seat to where I live, just outside Cambridge, I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like we've got somebody go for a rural seat, which you generally don't see Labour doing as well in those seats normally, but in this case, obviously, we did fantastically well. So I thought this is exciting because it means that suddenly opportunities open up. There are other seats that people are realising that Labour can do really well in, and hopefully win as well. So the key here, I guess, is your campaign, right? So what was it you did in that campaign? How did you get your message through to the voters to make them realise they could have changed? Because I know from personal experience in Mid-Beds, Labour voters who absolutely just couldn't believe it, that they could have a chance to have an actual Labour MP for the first time ever. So what was the winning campaign that delivered that victory for us?
So I think it was probably three things that I think worked really well in Mid Bedfordshire to get us over the line. I think the first was making sure we really went out of our way to meet voters where they were. And that was both in our messaging, but also crucially in the way we campaigned, doing lots of very local events, being very present at community events right across the constituency, running, I think, over 30 Meet Me events across, 30 of the 48 towns and villages in Mid Bedfordshire through the campaign, so people could have a chance to come along and hear from me directly, and making sure that really we were just very accessible to people and present in their communities and present in the places they wanted the conversations, present in the Facebook groups, present on the doorstep, and present in the community events and town halls that we were putting on. Alongside that, and I think a really important enabler of that was just capacity. So the force of the Labour Party and the Labour movement when it comes together is something truly awe-inspiring. And the way we were able to mobilise and inspire not just people in the constituency, but also right across the country to come and support the campaign was really, really important, because that capacity meant that we could really deliver a level of presence that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. We had over 40,000 conversations as part of the by-election campaign, but we also managed to persuade hundreds of people to put up signs, posters, sometimes for the very first time, sometimes supporting Labour for the very first time with my face on it, to show that this time could be different, to create that feel that actually Labour was an option this time and Labour could win in that constituency. And then finally was just having, what I hope people saw as a very positive, hopeful message that was relevant to people in the constituency, using that meeting of people where they were, using that capacity and presence of campaigning to ensure that our messaging and our offer to people locally really resonated with their concerns. And I think a really constant positive thing we heard back on the doorstep was the fact that our priorities and our responses, either through leaflets, through emails, through follow-up letters, felt really rooted in the issues, not just at the constituency, but at that particular town and village. And actually, when you're talking to people in an area as disparate and rural as Mid Bedfordshire, having an understanding of that particular village, that particular settlement, proves so important too. So I think being incredibly available to people, meeting people both where they are, both in our messaging and our campaigning style, was important. Delivering capacity, so we could really feel present right across the constituency, and then using all of that to tailor really positive but localised messages that felt to people not just credible, because they were grounded in the reality of what was happening now and what realistically could be done. So, all of my pledges weren't, pie in the sky aspirations. They were broken down into what I do straight away in the first 6 months and over the first year of being an MP, so that people could get a sense of what actually specifically I would look to do about it. Meant that we were hopefully able, really, I think, to get hearing with people who'd never voted Labour before, and then take them on that journey to realising that actually this time round we were both the party who could beat the Conservatives, but also that should too. And we had a really positive, strong message they could believe in.
I absolutely love that, Ali, because there's two things I'd define there, right? So time and place. The fact that you're talking about, the actual deadline of you achieving for these voters, and the fact that, I guess they've probably felt left behind for decades, right? Because particularly with the last MP, they weren't even seeing that representation at all, or there was nobody to speak to, and that came up on the doorstep for me when I was campaigning for you. But also the fact that you're making the national message really relevant. And this is a really important message, I think, for PPCs who might be standing in seats which are harder, easier to win, wherever they are, is not just taking the 5 missions and saying this is what we want for the country, as important that is, and that is our dream and our goal, but also how will that affect you here in Flitwick? How will that affect you in Sheffield? How will it affect you in your village or your town? How does GB Energy affect, for instance, your area with jobs, or how many homes are we trying to build in this region? All those things are so important, aren't they, to actually make it really relevant and to make people realize, because we're talking about change, aren't we? And I think, there's something I've been really excited about in this campaign, seeing so far. We're going for the general election, but also in your campaign was an insight to that. the fact that we're talking about this is a period of change that we can go through. It doesn't have to be this way. And locally, it will look like this. And that is so inspiring, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I think, I would say I would certainly encourage all PPCs to do that. I know many already are. I know Kevin and Stephen here, Mike Tapp, Dover and Deal are both, I think, doing a really good job of taking those national messages and actually reshaping them into 5 missions that really speak to their constituency in a way that will resonate with their communities. But it is so powerful. And the more localised you can do that, the more powerful it is. It will obviously vary. Some constituencies will have one coherent town, one coherent sense of community around one place. Others, like Mid Bedfordshire, will be more disparate. And where they are, it's only more important, I think, to make sure that you are speaking to people in a way that really resonates with that specific community, rather than trying to voice national messages that will always be the most relevant to their concerns.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you, Ali. I just want to say then, you are now the MP for the area, right? So you've seen the other side of that as well. What's that been like? And I've seen your Twitter. You're always in surgeries. I see you're still very, very actively campaigning. And I love that because I think people need to see that now you're the MP, you have to be seen to do the job as well as do the job. So how's it been now that you're the actual MP for the area?
It's been amazing, and it's obviously been a bit of a roller coaster. Your life does just change overnight. You straight away go from your whole life being quite normal to your whole life being entirely surreal but very focused during the election campaign around the by-election, to taking on such a huge range of responsibilities, everything from setting up an office, hiring staff and becoming a small employer, to being a parliamentarian, a policymaker, someone who has to be in Parliament and whose life therefore has to be back in London 2, 3, 4 days a week sometimes, to someone who's got a real commitment and a real need now to deliver on all of those pleasures you're making in the community too. Getting that balance right, I think, has been something I've had to learn as I've gone along, and it's certainly been very welcome to have staff on board since the turn of the year to help me push things along a lot more. But it's also just the most amazing roller coaster. And actually to have an opportunity, not just to speak about change, but to actually try and deliver it too, is such an exciting privilege to have. And I've been really touched actually by the level of goodwill, I think, keeping up that visibility, keeping up that presence since the by-election is gained. I think, maybe it's a slightly unique case, but I think it's probably true of most constituencies by the time of the election, is that people feel very let down by politics and politicians at the moment, and particularly the lack of, I think, positivity and drift that we've seen under the current government means that a lot of people feel increasingly disillusioned with politics. And while you won't always be able to change everything overnight, you won't be able to rebuild that trust completely in one go, in one conversation. You won't be able to turn around local services in one day. Actually, by being seen and being active in working locally, speaking and focusing and grafting on issues that matter to people, you can really start to build up that trust, conversation by conversation, day by day. And I feel incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to keep that going, and incredibly thankful to everyone who's taken the time to continue to engage with the campaign since the election, because that source of positivity has been such a source of energy for me and the team through an exciting but very hard-working couple of months.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so in that case, I've got some questions for you now, which I'm going to ask every single guest who comes onto the show. You're the first, so you'll be setting the standard for these, okay, Ali?
Here we go.
And one of them,
pressure.
I will definitely judging you on one of them because it's about music. So, if there's something really embarrassing in there, I will be bringing this up forever. Okay, the first question is, I want us to fast forward a little bit, and fingers crossed we have a Labour government. We definitely don't take that for granted. We're fighting for it. But let's say we get to the stage where we have a Labour government, and Keir Starmer, our new Prime Minister, gives you a call and says he'd like to invite you around to number 10 to join the cabinet. Now, I'd just like to ask, is there any particular department that you would like to be a minister in one day, and what's your reason for that department?
So I'm currently PPS across DESNES and the Treasury teams. So I think by virtue of maintaining good relations with colleagues, I should definitely say either of those. I think they're both great teams, and I've really enjoyed working with both of those. It's where a lot of my experience has been, and they're really important agendas, and I think will be at the heart of the first 5 years of a Labour government. I think alongside that, my background as a teacher, my work with children and young people, that's always been something that's been really motivating, a kind of core part of my reason for getting more actively involved in politics. So I'd be very happy to kind of contribute to any work in that space too. But really, I think any opportunity to support a Labour government as an MP is an incredibly exciting one. And I just feel so hopeful, but so focused on making sure we get that opportunity to begin with.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. You got that one. That's good. Sort of say, by the way, because I'm an ex-teacher as well, and I sort of wondered when I was, when Gove was in charge of education, I remember thinking, are any teachers or parents or pupils ever, interviewed or just do these people know what it's like in schools these days? Because I just don't think they did at all. I think they had an idea of when I was at school, it was like this. And so I want schools to be like this. And I just felt like, the more teachers and people we get actually in these jobs, the better, because then they have a real understanding of what it's like on a Wednesday afternoon in November when it's windy and rainy outside and the class is fed up and don't want to be there, and you have to inspire them to and teach them. And I think those experiences are so important. That's why I hope that our MPs, our elected officials, are real people with this experience like you've had.
Oh, I agree. It's so important. I think there is nothing more frustrating than teachers at the moment to not only find themselves in such tough situations, given the whole host of challenges the sector's facing, but to hear almost nothing from a government that actually speaks to the reality on the ground. The fact that the government won't even acknowledge that there's a recruitment and retention crisis in teaching at the moment, I think is quite heartbreaking for the thousands of schools across the country who are really battling with that. And the fact that at a time where there are so many big challenges going on at the moment, that the government are doing things like making such a big deal out of their mobile phone ban, which is currently in effect already in most schools across the country. Again, I think just feels so disconnected from the reality of the struggles teachers are having. So no, I couldn't agree more on the importance of making sure we've got people with real experience in these professions in Parliament championing what they really need.
Yeah, fantastic. Right. The next question then, Ali, this is the one that I really am interested in now. I want you to imagine this is a few years down the line and the BBC producers of Desert Island Discs get in touch and they say, Mr. Strathern would like you to come on to Desert Island Discs. You'll have to choose some different pieces of music to obviously take onto the show and to the island. I'm going to ask you now, what is your number one Desert Island Disc song, tune, track, whatever, that you want to take onto the desert island with you? Go.
I think there are so many, to be honest, and it will probably change dependent on the time and when you ask me this question. But I think a constant classic and one that would have been in my top 10 pretty much from when it came out will be All My Friends by LCD Sound System. They're the band I've seen live most throughout my life. They're the band I've gone on some amazing trips and holidays to see with friends, that I've known from a very young age. And so for me, it is a track so rich in quality, but also rich in memories. So it would have to be that.
Okay, say that again, sorry, because I'm going to look this up and listen to it after the show. And I'm sure people listening would want to find this on YouTube or whatever. What's the band and what's the name of the song again?
All My Friends by LCD Sound System.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Well, check that out, everyone, afterwards. And I don't know if you'll be rocking out to that or if it's
you can tell me. You can tell me if that's an embarrassing fact you'll be bringing up again after you have done too.
Oh yeah, believe me, I will. Now, the thing, Ali, that I really appreciate is the fact that you are already elected as an MP. Many people who have come onto the show, in fact, the vast majority of those people will be PPCs for the up and coming general election, whenever that is. So, what advice would you have for them? Thinking about where you were in kind of June time last year, what sort of advice would you have for people who are going forward for Labour to get elected in the next general election?
I think, a few things. Firstly, it's worth it. It feels at the time sometimes like a monumental and never-ending and sometimes actually quite thankless task. And that was true in the by-election, but I can imagine that will be especially true for some PPCs who've been fighting an incredibly important fight in their constituency for much longer than I had to in the by-election campaign. I think alongside that, to the extent that I have any wisdom to offer, it's probably a couple of things. One, just being really disciplined with yourself, both in terms of your messaging and your time. So in your messaging, kind of being really clear about what your offer is locally and what your vision and values and I guess USPs are as a candidate. I think it's easy to draw upon so much of your life story, so much of your experience in these campaigns and forget the fact that for most people, they'll only really be interacting with you through 2 seconds reading a leaflet and if you're lucky, a couple of 1-minute conversations over the course of the 2 years running into that election. And one of the things I found really helpful actually was the discipline the team forced on me through the by-election campaign and really distilling my CV and my vision down into, 2, 3, 4 very clear sentences and facts about myself that we could repeat enough that it really resonated with people. So I think having that clear and very trunicated life story and vision to pitch to people is important. And secondly is, and I think it can feel a bit strange to be try to force yourself forward always in the messaging as a candidate, to not be afraid to centre yourself in the campaign. I think one of the things that we found really effective, I think above and beyond what we'd anticipated at the beginning of the campaign, was the extent to which, given people's lack of trust in politics, building up a trust in a person as well as a party was really important to them. And the number of times we heard the refrain, "I'll be voting for the person, not the party," through the by-election campaign was quite telling. And so while it will be very important, particularly in a big national campaign, to make sure we're selling that big positive vision of Labour, of what we're going to do in government, not being afraid, not being shy about actually making space in your materials, in your campaigns, in your posters even. You know, every galling as it was for me, every poster we put up had my face on, every yard sign we put up had my face on, and that was an incredibly effective way of being visible and being almost quite relatable to people by the end of it. Don't be afraid to do that, because now more than ever, people want to know they're voting for someone who they trust and that they can relate to. And the more that you can use, you know, your own personal qualities and your own campaign messaging to build that, the better. And it can feel quite strange sometimes to put yourself so front and centre. As for someone who's, you know, a little shy like myself, it wasn't something I was always incredibly comfortable with through the campaign, but it's such a powerful message, and it's such a powerful way of making sure people feel confident, not just in Labour again, but in you specifically. And I couldn't recommend it enough.
Fantastic. I love that. And also, you know, just go alongside that, I saw Jen Kitchen's campaign. I was in Wellingborough last week on the by-election day, and the sticker, in fact, I see it at the back of my phone when I'm recording this now, her sticker's awesome. It's her picture, you know, and you think, oh, that's a person that I kind of feel like I could get to know. She's a normal person. She lives here. She's from here, like yourself, you know, a local person. And actually, that's the thing with our system that I do love. You know, I'm not going to get into the first past the post versus PR debate, but I would say in our system, you have an individual who is your representation, who does stand up for you or your community. And I think that is the important thing of this election, isn't it? To show who that person is, because they are a real living, breathing person who will be working darn hard as your Labour MP one day. And that's really important, isn't it?
No, exactly. And, you know, it can feel almost American sometimes, I think, which seems a bit strange. But actually, you know, Americans campaign that way because it works. It's something I think we need to be less shy about learning from sometimes. And so actually centering that. And I think it was great to see what we could deliver in Mid Beds, but I think they, you know, the party took it up another gear with the campaign they ran in Wellingborough and in over in Kingswood too. And I was so inspired by the way they managed to pull that off, but also the strength of candidate they had both in Jen and Damien to deliver a really compelling vision of what could happen.
Okay, Ali, right. So I just want to ask quickly about how people can get involved in your campaign. Members who are around the region who want to go out and campaign for you, where should they head to? Are there any dates coming up or any Facebook groups or, you know, websites, or what is the best place to go and campaign for yourself to get re-elected?
So every campaign event we do will be advertised on Labour events. That we'll be putting them up on the website as well, alistairstrathern.com. But if people are particularly keen to get involved, now is the time to do it. The seat I'm re-standing in, which is part of my Mid Bedfordshire constituency, but also a few other areas from Hitchin, including Hitchin, that we're picking up through the boundary review, is on most rankings a tipping point seat for winning a majority Labour government. So if you want to make sure we get over the line, if you want to make sure we are seeing Keir Starmer in number 10, there is no better place to come, I would argue, in the area than Hitchin. They probably would expect me to say that. And that is especially true because just like we saw in Mid Bedfordshire, it's somewhere where persuasive conversations are going to be really important. We are speaking to lots of disaffected Conservative voters who want reassurance, but also lots of people in the town of Hitchin who are used to the Lib Dems being the tactical choice under the old seat boundaries. That may have been true. I think it's debatable, but may have been true previously. It definitely isn't true now. And those people are, you know, those people will make or break this election for us. And every conversation we're able to have with them to point to the polling data, to point to the boundary changes, is a conversation that's likely to be earning us a vote come the election. So if you want to be part of that, if you want to be somewhere where you know you'll have an impact, come along to Hitchin. We are out every single day of the week and certainly at weekends. If you'd like to get more involved, if you'd like to be added to one of the WhatsApp groups, you can drop me a line at ali@alistairstrathern.com. It's ali@alistairstrathern.com with your details, and we will make sure we get you added to the list, because it's been such a brilliant campaign to keep going, and the more the merrier between now and whenever the general election comes, to make sure we get over the line.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alistair. And I just want to say to everyone listening, if you haven't been part of a campaign before, if you're new to the party or you're just new to campaigning, please go along, because I'd say that from my experience of Mid Bedfordshire, Wellingborough and places, the party is getting better and better. It's really good actually now at getting new people and giving you a bit of training, putting you with somebody with a bit of experience. And actually, you know what? Going on the doorstep, it seems a bit daunting if you're not used to it. When you do it, it's wonderful. There's a real privilege, I think, in just having those conversations, listening to what people are saying, because actually, you know what? People, they don't want to be spoken to and pontificated to. They want to be listened to, and they want to say what's going on in their area. And they're very proud of their areas and their communities, as they should be. And it's a real privilege to be there and to hear that and to help the Labour cause. So if you're new to it, please go and help Ali and Alistair and our other candidates. And you'll get the training and support you need as well, because it's really fun. And it is a social event as well. When you come together with like-minded activists like yourself, and all that positivity that Alistair certainly gave to his campaign, you feel like we're going to achieve something. We're part of this. I mean, you kind of ruined my conference experience, because I was on the phones calling Mid-Beds the whole time, like, come on, we're going to do this. We're going to get him over the line. Come on. Yeah, do you want to go for a pint?
Where would you have rather been than in that phone banking room, Dan? And it was so appreciated. Because again, those conversations make a difference, right? It's another piece of contact from the Labour Party. It's another chance for people to feel listened to, but also to feel reassured that actually if they vote for Labour, it won't be a wasted vote. We do care and we can win. It all helps. And so, no, I just echo what Dan said there. I think probably when I started out getting active in the Labour Party, we maybe weren't such a great party at bringing people into campaigns and making it a less daunting experience. But I think one of the things the by-elections really have showed is we've got so much better at making campaigning a welcoming and accessible place to be. And so if you'd like to get involved, there'll be tasks available at every end of the spectrum. And please do drop us a line.
Yeah. And just one thing, actually, Ali, when do you think the election's going to be? Do you think it's going to be May, November, January?
So do you know what? If you asked me this question before Christmas, I would have said could be May, but probably November. I'm now genuinely much more on the fence. I think the sheer chaos the Conservatives have had over the last few months, going back into recession, we found out obviously last week, and also the really resounding by-election defeats they had in Kingswood and Wellingborough. Rishi is probably going to get the sense that the time may come for him if he tries to drag it out until November, and on that basis go in May. So, there's still obviously the chance it drags out to November, but I think it's even more important than it was a few months ago for us to be election ready and to be putting in the hard yards, not in May, but now, to make sure that if it is a May election, we have done everything we can to deliver the Labour government we know we so desperately need to see.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, George Osborne said some date in November, and as soon as he said that, I was instantly thinking it's going to be May then, because why do you trust what George Osborne says about anything?
It's such an instinctive reaction to distrust, isn't it? And I know, I couldn't agree more.
It is, yeah. It's like, actually, we need to know what Boris Johnson says, and then whatever he says, it's definitely going to be the opposite one, and then we'll know for sure. Well, thank you for being my first guest on We Are Labour. It is superb to get somebody who is not only an elected MP, who is won in an area where on paper, we shouldn't really have won with such an amazing result we did, but he did a fantastic job in doing that. And that's down to Labour values, getting on the doorstep, working damn hard, but also the fact that he's a wonderful human being. So thank you so much, Ali, for being on the show. And if you've heard that and you're inspired, go and help Ali and our other candidates.
Thanks, Dan.